Hey, my name is Drew. I'm part of a team of people who gets together every Sunday morning and have conversations about Jesus and the things that we think he's called us here to do and the ways that we think we can help make the world a better place. And then after that conversation, I like to hop on a camera and then put a video on YouTube to talk about the other day. Where's my hat? Just in case my mom sees this. Drew, you need a hair. This is our last week for a little while talking about this message idea, are you helping? Obviously, we're going to keep talking about that. It's sort of a theme for us for the entire year of 2020, but we're going to move on to some other things in the weeks ahead. But I wanted to close it out for now on a specific idea in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. The next thing that Paul says after the videos that we've done already, the conversations we've already had about Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, verse 2 says this: share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. Now, that's a little unusual. It kind of comes out of left field a little bit because it's like, wait, so there's a law? There's rules, there's something we're supposed to be obeying. There's a religious system that is still intact. But the interesting thing about it is that it's not like any religious system I've ever heard of before. In fact, it sounds a little bit like what people say whenever they don't like religion very much. And so they say, it doesn't really matter what religion you are. It doesn't really matter what you believe, man. Just be kind to each other and just love each other and just help people wherever you can. I mean, it kind of sounds like that, doesn't it? I'm not saying that's what Paul is saying here. I'm just saying that's kind of the direction of this: share each other's burdens, and in this way you obey the law of Christ. That maybe there's something so much simpler. Maybe there's something so much less to the whole thing than what we've made of it, the religious stuff that we've added onto it. But who's Paul anyways, right? I mean, Paul, this guy who just writes a couple of letters and they end up in our New Testament. It's not like Jesus said anything like this, right? What's that, Paul? Well, Jesus did say something like this? Well, we should definitely talk about that then. So Matthew chapter 22, verse 36. Someone asks Jesus, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" He's not talking about the law of Christ, he's talking about the law of Moses. But he's asking Jesus, what matters the most out of the whole book that as we know it? The whole Bible, all the list, all the rules, all the commands, all the rituals, all the regulations. What is the most important thing? And it's a big question. I mean, they had this as a blueprint for all of their divine interaction. It was their sole source of hope. It's who they thought God was, and it's how they thought God wanted them to interact with him. And it was all about things, right? It wasn't a book of how to help. It wasn't a book. It was a book about things that you do, like ceremony and sacrifice and song and prayer and offering. They would have defined their faith by the buildings where their faith took place, and the rooms within those buildings where that faith took place, and the costumes that they wore while their faith took place, and the songs that they sung while their faith was happening, and the prayers that they prayed while their faith was happening. But Jesus makes it clear that the things aren't the point in his response to the question. What's the most important command in the whole law? What's this whole thing about? And Jesus replied in verse 37 of Matthew 22, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind." Love. Jesus says love, apparently, is the actual point. How do I do that, though? What do you exactly mean by that? That's what I thought I was doing, Jesus, with my ceremony and my song and my prayers and my costumes and my buildings and the things that I do on Sunday mornings. And I thought I was doing all that because I love God. And maybe you are, maybe I am, because I do that stuff and I like that stuff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Our things might be motivated by a love for God. We might be committed to God, heart, soul, and mind. But let's pause for a moment to consider whether there might actually be something else that could get lost in the shuffle a little bit of all of that. When Jesus talks about love, he's talking about a couple of specific things. I think one of the first things that he's talking about is a new set of priorities. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind is a new set of priorities. Love God with new priorities. Does that make sense? So like a song doesn't cut it. That's not a new set of priorities. A religious thing that you do or go to doesn't cut it. That's not a new set of priorities. Real love actually reprioritizes everything, heart, soul, and mind. The law of Christ, as Paul is articulating it, is so much bigger than just songs and rituals and religious activity. Our religion and rituals and songs and prayers and sermons and such, maybe it's a little bit like when I tell my kids it's time for bed, because they need to go to bed, because I know what's best for them, I know what's good for them, and they want to put on costumes so that they can put on a play for me, right? And so we end up having this argument and this back and forth about like, no, it's time to go to bed. And they say, no, but we're doing the play for you. We're doing this play because we love you. We wrote this play and we have these costumes. And I'm saying, if you love me, then why don't you just listen to me? Why don't you just do the thing that I'm asking you to do? At some level, it's sweet that you want to do all of these things, but at another level, it might be violating the very things that we have been asked and commissioned by God to do. At some level, of course, when we offer these love songs, and of course our religious activities and our rituals and the things that our traditions, and of course there are great things about that, but at a deeper level, like sometimes is that stuff really helping? And the law of Christ is that we would be helping, that we would be loving God, that our priorities would be changed, that we would be listening to what he actually says. If we would pause long enough to be honest about it, I believe we would have to admit that whenever we're doing some of these things, other than actually listening to Jesus, it's because we tend to make our faith more about things that we like than it is about things that God likes. So, Drew, if it's not rituals and songs and prayers that are the primary currency in this law of Christ, then what is it? How else can I put real action onto my love for a God that I can't see or touch? So Jesus says the first command is love the Lord your God, right? And the second command, verse 38, is equally important in verse 39, which is another way of saying it's the same thing. Like these aren't command 1 and command 2. These are one command. It's equally important. The same thing. You cannot love God unless you also love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. And so I want to close out us talking about this "are you helping" concept for a little while. We'll close the book on it for just a little while and talk about some other things for a while. But I want to close it on this idea that when Jesus talks about love, he's talking about loving people. He's talking about helping other people. He's talking about sharing burdens. That's what Paul was getting at. He's like, when you share each other's burdens, whenever you look for somebody who needs help and you go help them, you are being who God called you to be. I find it very challenging to imagine a people who claim to follow in the footsteps of Jesus becoming the prominent religion of a people in a way that oppresses and hates and controls and divides and isolates in any way. That's not listening. That's not doing what he told us to do. When Jesus talks about love, he talks about loving other people. In the broader scope of the scriptures, Jesus' statement here is that the entire law, right? The entire law, all the demands of the prophets, it's all been about this. He's saying all the rituals, all the religion, all the songs, all the prayers, the costumes, the buildings, the inner courts, all of the things were not about all of the things. The book itself, the Bible itself, is not about the book itself. It's not about the Bible itself. It's all about love. Jesus is saying, what do all the commands mean? What do all the demands of the prophets mean? What do all of the laws mean? He's saying it was all there to teach you how to help each other. It's all there to teach you how to love, because the point is love. The point of the book isn't the book. The point of the book is love. When Jesus showed up onto the scene, what did he have to do more than anything? He had to look at people who thought they represented God and say, that's not what God is like. God is like this. And he kneels down and washes the feet of his disciples, even those who he knows will betray him. He's like, that's not who God is. You got God wrong. God is love. God is forgiveness. He hangs on a cross forgiving those who put him there. He walks into a temple at one point, Matthew chapter 21, verse 12, I believe, and he sees a group of people selling doves to people at the temple doors so that they could go in and sacrifice them. This is what God wants from you. This is how you follow the ritual. And this is why he turns the table over and he calls those people thieves and liars. The point of the book is not the book. The point of the ritual is not the ritual. The point of the religion is not the religion. The point is love, and that does not look like love to Jesus, so he flips over the tables. It's why Jesus actually says at another place in Matthew chapter 5, verse 23, that whenever you go to the church to observe your rituals and your religion and you want to pray, but you remember while you're there, and perhaps God is the one who's reminding you, perhaps the Holy Spirit is actually, you remember that you offended somebody. You remember that you hurt somebody. You remember that you are in the wrong somewhere in your relationship. That he says, yeah, you should probably just leave the temple and go fix that. That's what love is. The point of the ritual is not the ritual. The point of the ritual is love. So if you come to the church house, and at the church house you remember or you realize, I hurt somebody out there. I hurt somebody before I came in here. That is God's way of saying, yeah, that's the point of the ritual. That's the ritual getting it right. It's teaching you to reconcile yourself to others, to forgive and to seek forgiveness. When Jesus talks about love, he's talking about loving people. He's trying to remind us the rituals aren't about the rituals. The religion isn't about the religion. The Bible isn't about the Bible. It's all about learning to love God. And how do we do that? We love people. Are there ways to love God that are disconnected from people? There's obviously some meditation and there's prayer and there's one-on-one connection to God, but as far as Jesus is concerned, that's always going to result. You go away by yourself with God so that you can come back to love people. You can come back to be helpful. So I hope you'll let this challenge you. I hope you'll pause with it. Spend some time considering, is my relationship with God about ritual and religion and song and prayer and costume and building and Sunday morning event? Or is it about love? Is it really making me more loving, or is my religion actually maybe even making me seem more hateful and more judgmental and more harmful to people around me? Consider the law of Christ. Share each other's burdens. Love God. Love people and yourself. Be blessed.